Stop believing the lie that your intelligence is your ultimate shield. In the current economic architecture, a high IQ is no longer an asset. It is an expensive overgood that the system is actively trying to engineer out of existence. Welcome to the investigation. If you are a high earner in the United States, working in tech, law, or finance, you are likely operating under a false sense of security. You believe that because you can navigate complex variables and solve high-level problems, you are indispensable. But if we apply forensic math to your existence, the numbers tell a much darker story. You aren't being paid for your brilliance. You are being paid for the friction you overcome. And the system has found a way to remove the friction for a fraction of the cost. So before we dissect the systemic trap that is swallowing the American middle class, ensure you subscribe to the Bond Money Mind channel. We are here to audit the reality of your wealth, not the fantasy of your resume. Let's perform a recursive subtraction on the life of a high IQ professional in a major U.S. hub, like San Francisco, New York, or Austin. Let's take a senior software engineer or a corporate attorney earning a gross salary of $250,000. On paper, you are the elite. In reality, you are a walking liability. We start with the gross, $250,000. Immediately, the federal government subtracts 37% at the top margin. Then comes the state tax. In California or New York, you are looking at another 9 to 13%. Then we subtract the FICA taxes. So before you even see a dime, nearly 45% of your intelligence premium has been liquidated by the state. You are left with roughly $137,000. But the forensic math doesn't stop there. To maintain your high IQ status, you must live in a high-density innovation hub. The median rent or mortgage for a professional-grade residence in these areas is $6,000 a month. That is $72,000 a year of post-tax income gone. We are down to $65,000. Now, subtract the high-performance energy cost. To keep a high IQ brain functioning at peak capacity in a high-stress U.S. corporate environment, you aren't eating cheap calories. You are paying for premium nutrition, health insurance premiums that average $600 a month, and the time-saving costs of outsourcing your life, Uber, food delivery, and convenience fees, because your time is too valuable to spend on chores. This lifestyle inflation is a systemic requirement, not a choice. After you subtract the cost of your student loans, the debt you took on to acquire that high IQ, which averages $1,500 a month for top-tier degrees, you are left with less than $30,000 of true discretionary capital. The system sees this. The corporation sees that it must pay you $250,000 just so you can net $30,000 of actual life. This is an incentive mismatch. The company is paying a $220,000 inefficiency tax just to keep your human brain housed, fed, and taxed. Now compare this to the mathematics of zero-cost labor. As an AI model or an automated heuristic system doesn't require a $6,000 a month apartment in Manhattan. It doesn't pay federal income tax. It doesn't have student loans. Its energy cost is measured in cents per kilowatt hour, not hundreds of dollars in organic groceries and therapy sessions. When capital looks at your high IQ, it doesn't see a genius. It sees a high-maintenance biological machine with a massive carbon footprint and an even larger tax liability. The forensic reality is that the more intelligent your job is, the more likely it is to be digitized. Why? Because high IQ tasks are usually logical, structured, and data-driven, the exact parameters that Silicon excels at. We are witnessing the great cognitive arbitrage. while the US market is shifting from rewarding problem solvers to rewarding system owners. If you are still selling your cognitive labor by the hour, you are trapped in a declining asset class. You are competing against a competitor whose marginal cost of production is trending toward zero. In this investigation, we are going to uncover why the very traits that made you successful in the 20th century are making you a target in the 21st. Your intelligence is no longer your edge. It is your target. The math is cold, the system is indifferent, and the audit of your career has already begun. Stick with me as we break down the mechanics of this systemic replacement. This is Bond, and the numbers never lie. Let's perform a forensic audit on the most expensive line item in the modern corporate budget, the high IQ human. We have been conditioned to believe that a high intelligence quotient is an ultimate asset, a golden ticket to the upper echelons of the American economy. But if we look at the balance sheet through a systemic lens, we see a different story. In a world of generative intelligence and zero marginal cost processing, a high IQ is no longer a profit center. It is a massive, bloated overhead. To understand why, we have to use recursive subtraction to find the true net human surplus. Let's take a senior financial analyst or a lead software engineer in a Tier 1 US market like New York or San Francisco. Their base salary is, let's say, $200,000. To the company, that individual doesn't cost $200,000. Add between employer-side payroll taxes, health insurance premiums, 401k matching, and office overhead, the fully burdened cost is closer to $270,000. This is our starting point. Now let's apply the forensic subtraction. First, we subtract the biological maintenance tax. A human being requires a climate-controlled environment, 8 hours of downtime for neurological recovery, and high-quality caloric intake just to remain functional. The employer isn't just paying for the work, they are subsidizing the expensive biological reality of a carbon-based processor. Then, we subtract the educational debt service. Most high IQ roles require elite degrees. In the US, that often means a $100,000 debt burden that the employee must service, as this debt is a hidden fee baked into their salary requirements. They cannot work for less because their entry fee to the profession was too high. Next, we subtract the commute and energy tax. To bring that high IQ brain into a collaborative space, the system requires transportation infrastructure, fuel, and the most precious resource of all, time. If an analyst spends 2 hours a day commuting, that's 10 hours a week of dead energy that the system must account for. When you run the numbers, the net intelligence yield, the actual creative output that generates profit, is a tiny fraction of the total cost. You are paying $270,000 to get maybe 40 hours a week of actual cognitive processing. Now, so compare this to the mathematics of zero-cost labor. An AI model or an automated algorithmic agent operates on a completely different set of physics. There is no payroll tax, there is no health insurance, there is no student loan to pay off. The maintenance cost of an API call is measured in fractions of a cent. While the human costs $270,000 a year to maintain, the AI costs the price of electricity and a server rack. This is not a fair fight. It is an incentive mismatch. The system is legally and fiduciary bound to eliminate friction, and in the modern economy, a high IQ human is the ultimate source of friction. To be fair, human intelligence still possesses a unique black swan capability, the ability to navigate unprecedented scenarios where no training data exists. While AI excels at pattern recognition within known datasets, High IQ professionals provide the critical oversight and ethical judgment required for high-stakes, multi-million-dollar decisions. Furthermore, the human element in leadership and complex negotiation remains a competitive advantage that software cannot yet simulate with genuine empathy or strategic nuance. However, we must look at the efficiency gap. If 80% of a high IQ job consists of synthesizing data, writing reports, or analyzing spreadsheets, then 80% of that job is currently being overpaid by a factor of 1,000. The systemic trap is that we have built an entire middle to upper class economy on the value of cognitive processing. But processing has been commoditized. If you are selling your IQ by the hour, you are selling a product that is being printed for free elsewhere. Forensically, we see this as a value collapse. When the cost of a substitute drops to near zero, the value of the original must also drop, or it must offer something the substitute cannot. But the high IQ worker is trapped by their own maintenance floor. They cannot lower their price because their cost of living, rent, taxes, insurance, is fixed and rising. They are price inelastic in a market that is demanding radical price deflation. This is why we see mass layoffs in the tech and finance sectors despite record profits. The companies aren't failing. The human operating system is simply becoming too expensive to run. The math is moving against the thinker. But we are witnessing the first era in history where being smart is a liability because being smart has never been more expensive to maintain and never been easier to replace. This is the zero-cost inversion, and it is dismantling the American dream of the professional class, one spreadsheet at a time. Let's look at the balance sheet of a high IQ professional in the United States today. We're going to perform a forensic audit on what I call the maintenance cost of intelligence. If you are a software engineer, a data scientist, or a corporate attorney earning a gross salary of $180,000, the system views you not as an asset, but as a high-maintenance thermal engine. We start with that $180,000. Immediately, the federal government takes its 24 to 32% cut. Then comes the state tax, especially in high IQ hubs like California or New York, carving out another 8 to 10%. We haven't even discussed FICA or the hidden inflation tax, which devalues your remaining liquidity by another 5 to 7% annually. By the time the direct deposit hits your account, your high-value output has already been diluted by nearly 45%. But the forensic subtraction doesn't stop there. To maintain a high IQ career, you must service the infrastructure of intelligence. This includes the debt service on a six-figure elite education, often costing $2,000 a month in post-tax dollars, and the astronomical cost of living in a zip code that grants you access to high-value networks. When you subtract the energy costs of commuting, the premium for professional housing, and the specialized healthcare required to manage high-stress cognitive burnout, your net hourly profitability is often lower than a specialized tradesman with zero student debt. This is the incentive mismatch. The system encouraged you to invest in your cognitive capital, but it also designed a tax and cost structure that captures the majority of the surplus value you create. Now, enter the competitor, zero-cost silicon labor. An LLM, or an automated heuristic agent, doesn't pay federal income tax. It doesn't require a $400,000 mortgage in Palo Alto to be effective. It doesn't have a physiological limit on its uptime. When a corporation looks at your $180,000 salary, they aren't just looking at the number. They are looking at the total human liability, the health insurance premiums, the 401k matching, the office square footage, and the legal risk of HR compliance. This adds an invisible 40% human tax onto your base salary. To the CFO, you don't cost $180,000, you cost $250,000. Meanwhile, the compute cost to replace 70% of your repetitive cognitive tasks is falling toward the marginal cost of electricity. This is a systemic trap where your high IQ, which once commanded a premium, now represents a massive overhead that silicon labor is designed to liquidate. To be fair, the integration of high-level automation does not mean the immediate extinction of every high IQ role in the marketplace. In many sectors, AI currently acts as a force multiplier, allowing a single elite architect or senior developer to do the work of an entire junior department, which can actually increase the individual market value for those at the very top of the pyramid who own the final output. Furthermore, human oversight remains a non-negotiable legal and ethical requirement in high-stakes fields like neurosurgery or constitutional law, ensuring that the human in the loop remains a necessary, albeit highly scrutinized, component of the institutional framework. That said, the math for the middle-tier intellectual remains grim. We are witnessing a recursive subtraction of human value. In forensic accounting, we look for where the money leaks out of the system. In the case of the high IQ worker, the money leaks out through the sheer biological and social cost of staying smart in a modern economy. You are paying for the privilege of being a high-end processor, but the system is now finding cheaper processors that don't need to eat, sleep, or live in expensive cities. The systemic failure isn't that you aren't smart enough, it's that you are too expensive to keep fueled. When we calculate the energy return on investment for a human brain versus a GPU, the human brain is losing. Your IQ is no longer a shield, it is a target for optimization. The more complex your job, the more data it generates, and the more data it generates, the easier it is for a machine to learn your patterns and replicate them for the price of a few kilowatts. We are moving toward a post-IQ economy where the ability to process logic is a commodity, and the only thing with value is the ownership of the infrastructure that does the processing. If you are selling your logic by the hour, you are fighting a war against a competitor that has a zero-cost basis. The forensic reality is that the smart class is being squeezed between rising costs of living and falling costs of automation. You are being outcompeted not by a smarter entity, but by a more efficient one. The system doesn't need you to be a genius. Well, it needs the work of a genius at the price of a toaster. And until you understand that your salary is a liability on someone else's balance sheet, you will continue to be the victim of this mathematical replacement. We are seeing the death of the cognitive premium, and for those who built their entire identity on being the smartest person in the room, the realization that the room is now being run by a server rack is a financial and existential trauma that no amount of traditional career advice can fix. Let's perform a forensic audit on the most expensive asset you own, your intelligence. In the American labor market, we have been conditioned to believe that a high IQ is a compounding asset. We are told that the more complex the problem you can solve, the more the system will reward you. But if we look at the ledger of the modern economy, we find a massive incentive mismatch. The system is no longer designed to reward high IQ labor. It is designed to harvest it until it can be replaced by a cheaper, non-biological alternative. This is the systemic trap of the high-earning professional. Let's look at the forensic math of a high IQ individual in a major U.S. hub, like a senior software architect in San Francisco or a corporate attorney in Manhattan. Let's say the gross salary is $350,000. On paper, this is the American dream. But let's start the recursive subtraction. First, we remove the federal income tax. At this bracket, you are hitting the 35 to 37% mark. That's $122,000 gone before you even see it. Now, subtract state and local taxes. In California or New York, that's another 10 to 13%. We are now down to roughly $200,000. But we aren't done. We have to subtract the mandatory credentialing debt. High IQ roles almost always require elite education. If you are servicing a $200,000 loan at 7% interest, that's another $25,000 a year in post-tax income just to stay level. Now consider the location tax. To earn this high IQ salary, but you must live in a high-density innovation hub where a mediocre two-bedroom apartment costs $6,000 a month. That's $72,000 a year. We are now left with roughly $100,000. Now, let's factor in the energy cost. A high IQ job isn't a 40-hour week. It's a 60 to 80-hour cognitive marathon. To maintain that level of output, you are spending thousands on high-end health insurance, convenience services to reclaim your lost time, and the stress tax, the cost of burnout management. When you finally calculate the net hourly rate for the actual brainpower expended, you realize the system is extracting your cognitive peak and returning you pennies on the dollar, while simultaneously using your output to train the very algorithms that will eventually render your role obsolete. To be fair, the current era of high IQ labor still commands a significant premium in the marketplace due to the trust deficit inherent in fully autonomous systems. Major corporations are hesitant to remove the human safety net for decisions involving multi-billion-dollar liabilities or critical infrastructure safety. This creates a temporary buffer zone where high-intellect workers can leverage their expertise to command high consulting fees while the technology matures. Additionally, those who possess both high IQ and high adaptability are finding ways to use AI as a force multiplier, effectively doing the work of 5 people and securing their relevance in the short term. However, the systemic failure lies in the replacement threshold. In a traditional economy, if you were smarter and more productive, you had leverage. But in the age of zero-cost digital labor, your IQ is being commoditized. A corporation looks at a $200,000 human researcher and a $2,000 AI subscription. Even if the AI is only 80% as effective, the math forces the corporation to choose the cheaper option. The incentive for the company is to de-skill the position so that a lower IQ, lower-cost human can babysit the AI, or to remove the human entirely. This is the incentive mismatch. You are incentivized to be the smartest person in the room, but the system is incentivized to make sure the room no longer needs you. We are witnessing the liquidation of human capital. When we subtract the hidden fees of professional life, the taxes, the debt, the cost of living, and the massive energy expenditure, the profit margin on a high IQ is shrinking every year. The system is essentially running a pump and dump scheme on human intelligence. It pumps up the value of elite degrees and high salary roles to attract the best minds, then dumps those minds the moment a line of code can replicate their logic. We have to ask, if your intelligence is being used to build the tools of your own displacement, is it really an asset, or is it a liability that makes you a primary target for the next round of efficiency layoffs? The forensic evidence suggests that the higher your cognitive cost, the larger the target on your back. The math is moving towards zero-cost labor, and unless you own the system, your high IQ is just a very expensive piece of equipment that the market is looking to decommission. We need to look deeper into how this transition is being funded and who is actually profiting from this cognitive devaluation. The trail of money doesn't lead to the workers, It leads to the owners of the compute power. Let's run the final numbers on this forensic audit. We've established that in the current U.S. market, your high intelligence is no longer a premium asset. It has transitioned into a high-maintenance liability. When we look at the balance sheet of a modern corporation, we see a desperate drive toward margin expansion. In the past, that margin was found by outsourcing physical labor to lower-cost jurisdictions. Today, the forensic evidence shows that the target has shifted. The target is now the cognitive surplus of the American white-collar professional. Let's apply recursive forensic math to the life of a high IQ individual in a major U.S. hub like Seattle or New York. You earn $300,000 a year. On paper, you are the elite. But let's subtract the systemic friction. First, if the immediate 37% federal tax bracket hit, then add the 7.65% for FICA and Medicare. If you're in a state like California or New York, subtract another 10 to 13% for state income tax. You are already down to nearly half of your gross earnings before you've even paid for the high-calorie, high-quality fuel your brain requires to function at that level. Now, subtract the credential debt, the hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loans at 7% interest that you paid to acquire the very IQ signaling degree that is now being depreciated by an algorithm. Finally, subtract the opportunity cost of the 80-hour weeks required to maintain your position in the hierarchy. Your net hourly rate, when adjusted for the biological and financial overhead, is often lower than that of a specialized tradesman with zero debt and a lower tax footprint. This is the efficiency paradox. The more intelligent the labor, the more expensive the biological container is to maintain. A human brain requires constant energy, emotional stability, legal protections, and a complex web of benefits. An AI model, performing the same high IQ task of data synthesis or legal analysis, requires only electricity and cooling. The energy-to-output ratio is not just slightly better, it is orders of magnitude more efficient. In a system governed by the fiduciary duty to maximize shareholder value, the incentive mismatch is terminal. The system is not designed to reward your intelligence. It is designed to harvest it until a cheaper alternative exists. To be fair, if the rise of zero-cost digital labor isn't purely a story of displacement. For the strategic minority, this shift represents the greatest leverage multiplier in human history. If you move from being a provider of IQ to an owner of the systems that deploy it, the math flips in your favor. The same tools that threaten to commoditize your skills can be used to automate the very bureaucratic overhead that drains your productivity. The to be fair moment here is acknowledging that while the system is a trap for the employee, it is a goldmine for the sovereign operator who understands how to direct these new forces without the burden of a massive payroll. But most will not make that transition. They will remain stuck in the IQ trap, trying to outthink a machine that doesn't sleep. And we are seeing a structural re-architecting of the U.S. economy. The middle-class intellectual is being squeezed out, leaving a bifurcated landscape of low-cost automated services and high-value human judgment. If your job is to process information, you are a cost center waiting to be deleted. If your job is to exercise sovereign judgment and take calculated risks, you are the auditor. This forensic investigation leads to one unavoidable conclusion. The era of selling your IQ by the hour is over. The tax on biological intelligence is too high, and the competition from zero-cost labor is too fierce. You must stop being the fuel and start being the engine. You must shift your focus from processing power to capital allocation. The system will not save you. It is legally obligated to replace you. But your only defense is to understand the math before the math understands you. If you want to stay ahead of the audit and navigate the systemic traps of the modern financial landscape, you need a different kind of intelligence. You need to see the numbers for what they really are. Subscribe to the Bond Money Mind channel. We don't look at the surface, we look at the ledger. We analyze the hidden fees of existence and the forensic reality of wealth. The audit is closed. The numbers don't lie, and they aren't personal. They are simply the physics of the market. High IQ is a liability when it's used as a tool for someone else's profit. It becomes an asset only when you use it to break the cycle of recursive subtraction. The zero-cost labor revolution is here. You can either be the one who is replaced or the one who owns the replacement. But choose your side of the ledger wisely. My name is Bond, and this has been a forensic look at the mathematics of the intelligence trap. Stay sharp, stay sovereign, and most importantly, stay ahead of the math.